Bruker Advanced Neo 500 megahertz NMR spectrometer. As you enter, as you can see, it has a sample changer here that has 24 sample positions. This is where you place your sample. To put your sample in a holder, you walk over to the console and you can pick up one of the spinners here. The blue spinners are used for most routine use. The white spinner in the top left is a ceramic spinner, and it's only used for variable temperature NMR spectroscopy. As you can see here, this is the depth gauge, and I'll show you how to use it in a second. To place your sample in the spinner, you can take the spinner here and you slide your sample slightly into it, and then take it to the depth gauge. You can see that here, and then you simply slide it down until it stops. So you can see that there. And you pull it out, and you can see it sitting in the spinner there. Okay, and then we take this and we put it in our position in our spectrometer. We're going to take position 6, and that'll be how we load it in for now using IconNMR. When using IconNMR, and the console and computer system should look like this.
All right, as we sit down at the computer, you'll see that there will be a window that says IconNMR Identify User. And the first thing you want to do is you find your name under the user's full name. These should already be populated with several users that will start using IconNMR at the WCNMR Center. If you do not see your name on this list, you are not set up or trained to be able to use IconNMR. So please submit a user request form on our website. If you do see your name, you simply click on it. My name is Zachariah Hayden, so we'll click on there and you click OK. That'll then open up the IconNMR automation window. We can minimize this window here. This one shown here is currently what is the last sample. So all right, we can now look and see and add our sample. Our sample is in holder number 6, as you saw there when we added our sample. So we can double click here. You can see that it says NMR data user Hayden. That's going to be the directory for wherever your data will be saved. So make sure that's all there. In the case of name, you can have the option of different options here. I like to use April, that's the month, date, and year for mine. So I'll put that here. And then your experiment number can be whatever you want it to be, anywhere from 100 to, I believe it goes up to 999. So you can pick a number there. Right now it's set at 20. I'll leave that there. Pick your solvent. The solvent that we have for this particular sample is benzene, deuterated benzene, so we can click that there. And then for experiment, this depends on what experiment you want to do. So for this experiment, we're going to do a proton, so that's right here, but to show a couple of options you can have, you can do a carbon-13 with coupling. It shows you the number of scans and the overall window of that, so those can be set there. There's also some other experiments as you scroll through. As you can see, here's boron-11. As we scroll further down the list, you can see other ones. There's fluorine-19. Some other 2D NMR experiments are there. Phosphorus-31 is here. And as we can go down, there's just some other proton experiments with different pulses. You can also see that there's platinum-195 built in, or silicon-29, or even some toxies or other things seen there. Depending on the experiments you want, you can click that there. So we're going to do a proton, so we click that. The next option is priority. It's automatically set that it'll run the experiment as soon as possible, so you don't need to play with that at all. You have the option of day or night queue. Everything's really set up just to run off a day queue where they run automatically after each other. We didn't quite set up a night queue for that because we don't quite have the demands to set that up right now. So you can just leave that set as day. The next one where the equals are, these help set up parameters. Your options will have number of scans, O1P, which is the offset frequency, and sweep width. You may also have a delay of D1 or other ones if you request those, but right now the default are the first 3, possibly 4, depending on what your requests are. But the first one, NS, is number of scans, so this is the number of times it'll scan the spectrum. The default is usually 16 for proton. If you want more, you can simply just type it in and say 32. O1P sets the center of the spectrum. So in Bruker, the topspin software, it picks the center of your NMR spectrum, and then what it does, it sets a spectral width and how far it moves overall based on that center. So for example, it's important if we're looking at hydrides or we need a larger spectral width for our spectrum based on the default. So if we want to say, let's just make our spectral width with the center at 5 ppm, and say we're looking for a hydride in this sample. This sample doesn't contain a hydride, but if we're looking for that, say we want to go all the way out to -25. If we wanted to go to -25, that means we need 30 on the right side and 30 on the left. So our total spectral width will be 60. So that'll mean that we're now going to go all the way out to 30 on the left, and or 35 on the left, and -25 on the right. All right, so with that, it'll click OK. You see this kind of apostrophe here, or this exclamation point. This states that you change the default parameters. That's okay, doesn't really mean anything on that. And then there's really nothing else you can change besides setting your title. So we'll just try sample IconNMR and click set title. All right, so once you have that all set, you can click on submit, and you'll see that your sample will then go here, and the spectrometer will then rotate over to your sample, over to holder 6, and it'll then insert your sample and start to collect data. So you can see here, if we look at the top right, it says that it's going to sample 6. That's this kind of stoplight type thing here. It's going, that's why it's a green. This is showing that we're collecting on the sample. You can see the status down here in the preceding experiments, but it's going to the sample. And the key here is you want to make sure that you pick your sample holder spot near where the previous sample was or where it currently was. Otherwise, it's going to take a while to get to that sample because the sample case only goes in one direction. At this point, if you're done submitting all of your samples, you can just click on change user. If you say you have a sample in 7 and say we want to add an additional sample, you can click on that, add that in here. It automatically just makes it 30. You can say, all right, this is proton, deuterium oxide was your sample here. If you want to add additional experiments to that, you can do, say this one added 2. So if we wanted a proton, a carbon, a coazine, or 2D stuff, we can set that all up to happen on a single experiment. And when this is all set up, you can click on submit to submit that to the queue. But since we only have one single sample, you can click on delete and delete and delete. As you can see now on the sample that we submitted, it's now doing its tuning and matching. So that's the ATM running. So that's what's occurring right there. So you can see that our sample is now loaded. That's why it has a check mark there. And it's now tuning and matching. And as soon as that is completed, it is a little slow on this spectrometer. It's a little bit slower than some of the variant systems. So be patient as it collects data. You'll see that the respective check mark will show up as soon as it's completed, and then it'll move into locking and shimming and acquisition and processing. But as to that, you can add as many experiments as you want. You can copy experiments if you want. It all depends on how many samples you want to submit and include. You can also see that if someone is already running samples, when you come up, you can see that it'll say the sample case is busy until 11:13. As you can see here in the clock, it's 11:13, so it'll be pretty quick once it's done. So right now you can see now it's locking. The tuning and matching is finished. So this is now the locking. icon. But as you can see, it'll be busy until 11:13, so that gives you an idea of how soon your samples will run if someone's already using it. And then you can see that there is nothing in the day queue and the night queue because this experiment is pretty short, it's only a minute 12 seconds. And then the current user here is hiding. So with that, you can see it's still locking. So you just have to wait for that. It usually takes a couple minutes to do some locking. It is now locked, so you can see the lock check mark is now marked. It's now moving on to shimming. So the shimming icon here is the circles going around the shimming icon. All right, now you can see shimming has completed. That's now green. The mark is there. We're now acquiring our data. So about a minute 12 for our data to collect. All right, so once you see that the acquisition has completed, that'll be green. You'll have a mark there. It'll then go to green and process. And then once the check mark processing, it will then send an email with the respective data. If you have requested that upon completion of your data set, this is done by in the initial request to access the spectrometer, you have the option of receiving an email with a PDF or a zip file of your data. If you did request this, you will receive an email immediately after that check mark shows that the the data has been collected. You'll also see that as soon as the data is done being acquired, the NMR sample will then eject from the spectrometer and will then go back into the sample case rack so that is available for pickup if you're ready to go pick up your sample. Please do not let your sample sit longer than 24 hours. Otherwise, they will end up being in the way of other users that will want to use the spectrometer. So please pick them up. We don't want to actually have to confiscate them if they end up sitting there too long. All right, so that is our tour of IconNMR. If you don't want to sit and actually see the data being collected, once you submit your sample, you can simply click on Change User, and it's all available for the next user to click and add their sample to collect data. If you're requested to receive an email upon data collection, you will see that there will be an email from NMR Center at wcu.edu. There will be an email that will say that your sample has been measured in a certain holder, whichever number you placed it in, at a certain time with an experiment number, and it'll state that that has been completed. This will mean that you are now able to actually pick up your sample from the actual sample case. If you selected to receive a zip file, you'll see that here is the zip data that you can readily use and work up in any kind of processing software such as Mesrenova, Nuts, or any kind of data with that. So with that, here's a tour of IconNMR. I hope you guys see that this is a beneficial program and acquisition software for collecting your data. Thank you.